Now that the dust has settled of the OG Anunoby trade from the Raptors to the New York Knicks, everyone's eyes are on what is next across the NBA. The Philadelphia 76ers have every reason to be one of the teams in the mix, as they have outplayed expectations thus far and still are probably one piece away from joining that true contenders list. A recent article dropped from Bleacher Report which hinted at a couple potential targets. This article was written by Zach Buckley and had 3 players listed for the top targets for each team. Now, I will preface this by saying, while I'm sure Zach does his homework and pays attention to the tea leaves, these are from his brain, not something that is concrete reported, and could be more so from his opinion than a source. I've been in those shoes, wrote those types of articles, is what it is, but I still want to talk about it because I still think there are some good talking points here. So without further ado, let's dive in and talk about these targets here. Number 1, Pascal Siakam. Number 2, DeMar DeRozan. Number 3, Gary Harris, which is a bit of a new one for this year, a pretty frequent name in the trade rumors connected to the Sixers. But Buckley writes, quote, "The 76ers don't necessarily need to make a dramatic trade, but they have the requisite assets, plus their prominent position in the championship race can justify an all-in push. They might only get one crack at this, though, so they have to get this right. Toronto could still be in the wheeling and dealing business after the OG Anunoby trade, and Philly might view Siakam as a supercharged version of Tobias Harris. Siakam is a more natural shot creator, and he's supplied better defensive film over his career. The low volume of DeRozan's long-distance game is a worry, but perhaps his playmaking could still sway the front office. If the Sixers believe that they have enough creation, that might covet Harris's on-ball defense and outside shooting. Plus, neither of these players are owed money beyond the season, meaning Philly could rent them for a playoff run and still bring more than $50 million in cap space into the 2024 offseason. So a lot of good thoughts here. Both Pascal Siakam especially has been a name pretty prominent in these conversations. We know that the Toronto finally pulled the trigger and did make the OG Anunoby trade. I do think that was the right move for the franchise, that it was time to rip the Band-Aid off and start moving, hand the keys fully over to Scottie Barnes and turn to this next generation. And then I think that includes moving on from Pascal Siakam here. So a couple of thoughts on Siakam first. Number 1, in the initial article from Woj when the Anunoby trade went down, there was this little nugget in here that I thought was important to note. Woj writes, quote, "Toronto is expected to continue to explore trades involving Pascal Siakam, but there are no deals with traction now," sources said. Both Siakam and Anunoby could be free agents this summer. So they're clearly in a sell the farm kind of mode, that they are inching towards a retooling, not necessarily a rebuild. I think getting Emmanuel quickly absolutely keeps their head above water instead of going into the full-fledged rebuild. But I still think that Pascal Siakam is a player that they should be in the business of moving on from, especially based on this indication, which this report coming from Mark Stein here saying, quote, "Word is that if he's dealt, he's unlikely to sign off on a 2-year extension and would prefer, again, to proceed to unrestricted free agency," meaning that any team that trades for him now must be daring enough to roll those dice, Stein wrote. "It's therefore unlikely rival teams are going to pay a premium player for a player who may be a short-term rental." So this kind of stopped a little bit of my momentum here. But the bottom line, and cutting through all the whispers, the reports, the different phrasings, the bottom line is Pascal Siakam wants to be a free agent this offseason. Now, we've talked all about the Sixers cap space plan, how that want to attack this offseason as the team with the second most cap space across the entire NBA, the Orlando Magic being first in that category, and the Sixers being in a unique category where they have an MVP caliber player in Joel Embiid. They have an up-and-coming star in Tyrese Maxey, and then they're ready to build out the roster from there. So if you're the Sixers, you have to really think about, is this the difference-making move that elevates the Sixers to possibly winning a championship this year? I don't feel that confident about Pascal Siakam being that guy. Now, I'm not going to fight with you and think that he is. I can see the logic. One of my greatest concerns with this team is I would like an increase in perimeter defense, that I don't have a ton of faith on guys being able to get stops against the Jason Tatums of the world, the Giannis, the Dame Lillard, these high-caliber players that the Sixers are going to have to get through on the playoff run. Now, Siakam has drifted a little bit from when he was really the elite defender that he once was. He's become much more of an offensive engine, and kind of the trade-off in the NBA is the more leash that you get offensively, the less responsibility you have defensively. That's why we have the PJ Tuckers of the world who are only in there to play defense, the Pat Bevs, the guys like that are solely focused on that defensive side of the ball. There is a balance to this roster because it is a lot, and it's major hat tip to the guys that do it, because there are still plenty of two-way guys across the NBA who are locked in and want those challenges. I think Siakam, it would be a much different role here in Philadelphia than it would be in Toronto. I'm curious if that can fully click over the span of a half a season. We've seen opportunities in the past, such as when the James Harden trade happened, how much that interrupted the entire flow of the Sixers offense. Now, Siakam wouldn't be quite as disruptive as Harden is from a stylistic basketball point of view, but the point still being that is a big piece to bring in and hope that it all clicks together over a short period of time. DeMar DeRozan is an interesting one to me. I don't think that there has been enough attention paid to DeRozan as a legitimate asset. I'll start with, I think DeMar DeRozan is a killer on the basketball court. That he is a guy, you give him the ball with the game on the line, with the shot clock winding down, he'll go get you one. And I do think that there's an area where the Sixers need that, where they could use one more guy capable of doing that. That Tyrese Maxey obviously has been terrific this year. Joel Embiid, we know who he is, but there also are some inherent, I guess, just overcomplications with building around a big man with the game on the line. There's things defenses can do, strategic doubles, the way that they can guard, that make it more difficult than is the case with a perimeter defender. DeMar DeRozan is a perfect blend of that. And one of the interesting points in this this little note here, I thought especially, was this comment here saying the low volume of DeRozan's long-distance game is a worry, but perhaps his playmaking could still sway the front office. If the Sixers believe they have enough creation, that might covet Harris's on-ball defense and outside shooting. So that meaning a Tobias Harris flip there. I think in any of these situations, Tobias Harris is a contract that should be firmly on the line, and I've been pretty strong in my feelings that I feel the guys like Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, and maybe even Marcus Morris to this point, I all feel are more vital to this Sixers team than Tobias Harris. While I give Tobias a ton of credit for taking the punches, taking the beatings, and really been the low man on the totem pole as far as where blame gets placed a lot, it's time to move on. And that cannot be more clear that there is no individual trait on the basketball floor that distinguishes himself and makes him necessary to this team. There's guys in that rotation that are better defenders, like Robert Covington and even Nico Batum. I would give the nod there. There's guys that are better passers, Nico Batum being the best entry pass playmaker to Joel Embiid on this roster, as well as just more willing shooter. He's more comfortable off that. Covington's a more willing shooter. Marcus Morris is straight up bucket and is a better shot creator with the ball on the floor than Tobias can do. So these are all in different lineups and different settings that are better options. And of course, in an overall vacuum, Tobias Harris is still the better player. But the concept for building this roster is you have to get the right complementary pieces to complement both Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. That those are the guys. Tobias is not the perfect complement to those guys, so you have to find players that are. And when there are already guys like that on the roster, it's something to consider. But if DeMar DeRozan or Pascal Siakam is thought to be that guy, that does change things a little bit. So I did want to look at the differences between these two as far as how they stack up. They're pretty similar to some extent as these sort of players. Siakam a little bit bigger than DeRozan, younger than DeRozan as well. We talked a little bit about the contract stuff. DeRozan is the better bucket getter, absolutely. That I am surprised the difference in assists of DeRozan having a little bit of a better notch here. The points, no surprise there. The three-point shooting is a bit of a concern for DeRozan. There's been moments where he's shown flashes of reliability from beyond the arc, but he's much more of a mid-range king. That he wants to get to his spots. He wants to shoot over guys, hit that fadeaway, hit that spin. That's the DeMar DeRozan game. But there's a little bit of them back and forth. So stylistically, I think they're somewhat similar. Positionally, they're a little different. That DeMar DeRozan, as I mentioned, more of a mid-range guy. Siakam, we've seen his volume from three go up constantly. I'm curious. I'm very curious, and I think this holds me back on a lot of the trade talks or my excitement for it. I'm not really sure what he would look like in another system. That in Toronto, there's a lot of opportunities or possessions where it's basically Pascal Siakam, go get one, go create your own shot, do your thing. And what's kind of held me back is obviously players get these reps and players get these opportunities when you're that caliber of talent, which Siakam is. He is, as much as he's not my style of player or my guy, I have to recognize that he's an all-star level talent and a guy that can fill up the bucket in a hurry when he gets going. So I don't know if he gets that opportunity with the Sixers. That Joel Embiid leading the NBA in usage percentage so far this year, and I don't expect that to change. Tyrese Maxey, one of the highest usage players in the NBA, a guy who has the ball in his hands on an every possession basis. How much leftover of the pie is there to slice out for this new addition? And that kind of slides me more over to the side of things of the Gary Harris conversation. Gary Harris has been a guy perennially in the trade conversations regarding the Sixers. Now, to look at his stats a little bit for this season, by the way, only 29 years old, so a little younger than I honestly expected. The biggest thing to look at here, the three-point numbers. 36.8% from three on 4.2 attempts per game. We're seeing his opportunity go down a little bit in Orlando. There's a ton of talent down there and a ton of young talent that Gary Harris just frankly isn't a long-term piece of their puzzle, so it makes sense cutting into his minutes and allowing others those opportunities to develop. I like Gary Harris. I think that would be a positive addition to this team, a decent rotational piece, a guy that can play some minutes. I think his defense isn't quite as advertised that I would label him as a shooter much more than anything. He can compete a little bit on the defensive side of the floor, but to me, he's a guy that's going to be in there to knock down shots. And if you believe in that, then it is a move that makes sense. I think Gary Harris is by far the lowest, I guess, price tag to get a deal in a trade here. So this kind of concept shifts back to the Sixers are comfortable in what they have and just looking for one kind of rotation piece around the end. I don't think that's the spot the Sixers are in. And I still think they need a guy that can go get a bucket, can go create a little bit, which shifts me back towards the DeMar DeRozan and Pascal Siakam kind of category. I don't think either of those guys are perfect either, if I'm being honest. There's still guys that I prefer, as in the Lauri Markkanen kind of category. I even had OG Anunoby above either one of these guys in kind of my list of pecking order, but I would not be mad if either one of them were names that were, I guess, brought into this roster. So for now, we are going to have to wait and see how things develop, and one of the greatest benefits of this is the Sixers are waiting for other teams to fall apart in the same way that they are aligning their vision. That very well, there's teams like the Memphis Grizzlies, who obviously got off to a very cold start. What if they turn into sellers and all of a sudden Marcus Smart is available as a potential trade piece? That would be somebody I would be interested in. Guys like that. So the Sixers are in a great spot where while their backs to some extent are against the wall, they have more flexibility than they have had in years. That they have all this cap space plan. They have that as kind of the hat to hang on, that there is no rush on this. And they're playing very good basketball. That this team still among the league leaders, even with their slight deficiencies and slight issues. I think they're very comfortably the third best team in the Eastern Conference, and I do think they're only a stone's throw away. That when we're watching moments like Tyrese Halliburton absolutely giving Dame Lillard the business and leading the Pacers to a win over the Bucks after being down double digits in the second half, that gives me hope that this Bucks team is not unbeatable. We've seen the Celtics team look bad for stretches. This is up for grabs. So the Sixers do have to dig in. They have to internalize. They have to think about how close they are, and figure out what steps it takes to get there. Whether that's a DeMar DeRozan, whether that's a Pascal Siakam, a Gary Harris, that is for Daryl Morey to decide. But until that point, I'll be here breaking everything down on Sixers Digest. Let me know your thoughts on those names in the comments. I'll give you a little feedback as well, and be back with you every step of the way right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.